Okay, so welcome to tonight's live webinar all about demystifying dyslexia. Dyslexia is one of those things that can be incredibly confusing and overwhelming if you don't understand it. So my goal tonight is to give you some really jam-packed information all about dyslexia and what is at its root, and some really important tips that actually changed the trajectory of my family's life. So as I promised in all of the posts and everything about this webinar, is that what I'm going to be revealing are my top 3 secrets about dyslexia. And it truly is information that changed absolutely everything for me and my family. So I'm going to be talking about the one characteristic of dyslexia that none of the other mainstream programs are addressing or even considering. We'll talk about why sight words are so stinking hard. And we'll talk about why many mainstream methods that are currently being used to help dyslexic students are just not reaching them fully. And we'll talk about what actually does. So make sure that you watch all the way to the end, because I'm going to be telling you some theory as well as some really important pieces at the end about what you can do to stop the struggle for you or your loved one. So this may be the most important information you've seen about dyslexia. So get a notebook and remove all of your distractions. So your phone, shut off the TV, Netflix, anything that's going to distract you, and just try to keep an open mind as we are going through this information. This information is not something that is typically presented about dyslexia. And some of you may be teachers, some of you may have dyslexia yourself. Um, and you may have a preconceived idea of what dyslexia is. So this is going to be very different probably than anything that you may have heard in the past. So really just try to just put aside everything that you know about dyslexia and keep an open mind and listen to this information to see if it resonates for you. So hopefully this is going to change everything you thought you knew about dyslexia, and it's going to be a lot of amazing information for you. Okay, so first, who am I? My name is Karen Logidici, and I am the owner and facilitator of New England Dyslexia Solutions in Amesbury, Massachusetts, right in New England. I am a licensed and certified Davis Dyslexia Correction Facilitator and Autism Facilitator and Coach. And I get that job title from the gentleman who actually created the Davis Dyslexia Correction Program. And his name is Ronald D. Davis, and I'll be talking about him in a little bit. So this is me and this is my family. So I have 2 dyslexic sons. My husband is dyslexic and I'm dyslexic myself. So this, in a nutshell, is what a family that has dyslexia looks like. There's nothing on the outside of a human being that would ever give away the fact that you have dyslexia. It is something that is internal and can easily be missed by others, because there is a level of intelligence that comes along with dyslexia that can kind of mask the symptoms. And even people who have dyslexia sometimes don't know they do. And I was one of those people. So my story begins with my oldest son, Alex, and he was struggling like crazy. And we just could not figure out what was going on. And it wasn't until I read the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, which is right here. And that is Ron Davis, the gentleman who wrote the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, and his wife, Alice, who is retired recently, but the director of the Davis organization. But when I finally found this book, The Gift of Dyslexia, it literally changed everything for our family, and more so my oldest son at the time, who finally turned things around for himself as he was going into 5th grade. So part of this webinar, and I have a lot to cover, so I am going to be kind of plowing through this information, and hopefully we will have time for Q&A at the end. But this presentation is really to break down the pieces of dyslexia that are important for you to understand in order to really find the help that can get to the root of why there is a problem to begin with. So we're going to talk about these 4 pieces of dyslexia. We're going to talk about the thinking and learning style. We are going to then discuss how that thinking style can have issues with symbols and words. We'll talk about perceptual distortion, as well as talking about the tools and techniques that can really, really help. Okay, so let's just start with the dyslexic thinking style. First of all, it's important to note that people with dyslexia tend to be picture thinkers. So they really specialize in nonverbal thought. Their thoughts are very much like movies. They're vivid. They have color, sound, emotion, movement, and there's very little, if any, verbal thought involved when you are a dyslexic thinker. So me, myself being dyslexic, also it's important to note that there's a whole spectrum of dyslexia. So there are people who are very mildly dyslexic all the way to very, very severely dyslexic. And where that line is wherever you have the verbal thought. So being mildly dyslexic means that you would have some verbal thought, although you default on picture thinking. And but as you go down the spectrum, you would have less and less verbal thought. And the less verbal thought you have, the more severe the dyslexia is. Okay, so what are the thinking style symptoms? Basically, the thinking style is amazing. It is an amazing, gifted way of thinking. Now, I do want to point out that there's no right or wrong way of thinking. It's just that this is a different kind of thinking that basically about 20% of the population will specialize in as they're developing. So, as the majority of the population are developing that verbal thought, people with dyslexia are really specializing in the nonverbal thought. So this thinking style makes you highly imaginative. It enables you to have really creative ideas and abilities, problem solving skills, intuition, and street smarts. These are people who think in the big picture. So really understand how things fit together. They're problem solvers. They might have the ability to see holes in process or logic. They have visual spatial abilities. So architects, builders, people who do home decor, all of these things are visual spatial, as well as some athletic pieces where there can be athletic prowess. We're going to talk about some people that have dyslexia who have been incredibly successful in their life, and they really cover the spectrum of all these different fields, and it really just is how their thinking style develops into a skill or a knack, something that comes very easily to them. Dyslexics can also be very empathic and very sensitive to the environment, sensitive to distractions, emotionally sensitive, and just to be able to, feel the environment, feel what other people are feeling. So it's a very interesting thinking style that has led to so many amazing um, people in the world. So Steve Jobs was dyslexic, Albert Einstein, Pablo Picasso, Jennifer Aniston. I mean, these are just, if you can see all of these different people, Thomas Edison. So we have inventors, we have filmmakers, we have actors, actresses, um, athletes, Walt Disney, these are big picture thinkers. Now, you just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean that you will necessarily become Albert Einstein. However, it is really empowering to know that as a dyslexic person, you have the same thinking style as some of these amazing people, right? So, and our theory on dyslexia is not that these famous and highly successful people, um, uh, you know, had their success despite their dyslexia. We believe that it is because of their dyslexia. It is because of the way they think, because of that imagination, because of that ability to tap into a picture. Um, or have that visual spatial ability that they were able to actually do what they do and master it to a level that goes beyond what the average person could do. All right. So when you match this thinking style with the learning style of someone with dyslexia, it's important to note that across the board, all experts in dyslexia agree that dyslexics will learn best with hands-on, experiential, multi-sensory techniques. So I know that's a mouthful, but basically anytime that you can create something, anytime that you can experience something, you can make something with your hands, and it's multi-sensory in that it's tapping into multiple senses. That information can go in and stay. That is really how a dyslexic is going to learn the best, is by being involved in it, being engaged in it. And we will learn by doing versus reading. So it's challenging when you're trying to learn something from reading, when really doing it or experiencing it is where you're going to get that really strong knowledge. So, by engaging as many of those senses as you can, and by creating, it really will give the dyslexic learner a picture, an experience that then they can start viewing the world through. So once you create something, it becomes part of who you are, becomes part of your intellect. And all future learning can be viewed through that filter. I hope that makes sense. So being involved and engaged in the topic is also critical. So let's talk next about the dyslexia dilemma, and that would be symbols. So picture thinkers usually only think with words that give them a picture. So their natural ability to perceive mental images three-dimensionally or multidimensionally doesn't work in the world of symbols, letters, words, numerals. Okay, so this is an example. So we have a dog here. And if you take this object, dog, and you look at it from any orientation, it is still going to be a dog. Okay. Now let's take this shape and let's change its orientation. It's not the same meaning, right? So in written language is the only time that when you look at an object and you change its orientation, it's going to change the meaning of what that is. And so for someone who thinks naturally in pictures and in object-based thought, it's very natural for us to be manipulating it in our mind. So we can look at things from all angles. We can look at things from the side, from the front, just mentally conjuring those images. So then that becomes our natural way to problem solve, where we're looking at things in multi dimensions. From all different directions. So it works really, really well for problem solving and for anything in the real world, like a real world object. But where it doesn't work is with symbols. And this is where the dyslexic thinking style can really start to become a problem when it comes to academics. So let's bring this even a little bit further, which is that all words are symbols. They are symbols as something that represents something else. It is a string of letters that represent sounds, and when you string those sounds together, you come up with the sound of the word. Well, some words are going to be easier to learn once the recognition of that symbol is linked to an understanding, a picture, or an experience. So it's going to be much easier for someone with dyslexia to master and identify words like butterfly or elephant or anything that is tangible, maybe like the word soft or something like that, because we can experience that. So once we understand that that shape of that word represents butterfly, and we have all three parts to a word, we have what it looks like, which is butterfly. We have what it sounds like, which is butterfly, and we have what it means, which is the picture that we have, then that word is pretty easy to master. Okay. But what is one of the biggest problems with thinking in pictures and language is that abstract words that don't conjure a picture or understanding will not be processed either fully or maybe just partially processed. So this diagram is showing one of the problems with reading for a dyslexic, in that there is really no tangible object that you can picture for those sight words. So if you have ever experienced, um, you know, whoever you're here for, whether it be a student or your child or yourself, if you've ever noticed or heard someone reading out loud, um, typically what you'll see is that there are those little words that get tripped up or left out. And we're going to go through the different symptoms in a moment. But it's very interesting when you start to notice that the sight words are usually the ones that are going to be the problem. I have so many parents come in and they say, I don't get it. My child can read the word Tyrannosaurus, but trips up on the word if. So there's a reason for that, though, because as a picture thinker, we really need to have a picture and an understanding in order for that word to make sense to us. When you're a verbal thinker, you're thinking with the sound of language. And so those words don't cause you a problem because it fits right in with your natural way of thinking. But without that verbal thought going on, it becomes a problem. And 60% of any given paragraph are made up of those little words. So, what do? We're not really processing about 60% of what we're reading. Dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. In fact, people with dyslexia tend to have higher than normal IQs. It really is a processing thing. It is a processing, it's a skip, it's a blank for all of those little words. And as you're reading, if 60% of the words you can't process, you can't conjure a picture and understanding for, then there's a problem. Your comprehension goes down, you get confused, you get really tired, and there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes with your brain in order to try to make sense of those. So I hope that makes sense. So when you are looking for signs of dyslexia, a lot of times I get, oh, isn't dyslexia when you read or see words backwards? And that is pretty much what people think dyslexia is. So there are lots of signs and lots of other things to look for. That is one very small, actually rare part of dyslexia. It can happen, but it certainly isn't the only thing that it is. So what I would like to do is just go through and just talk a little bit about the signs to look for, or some things that you might recognize in yourself or your child or your student. So the first thing is inconsistency in general. We always say that the most consistent thing about dyslexia is actually that it's inconsistent. But when you see inconsistency with reading ability, so sometimes reading feels okay, and other times it's a total nightmare and you're not getting anything out of it. If you see inconsistent spelling, so a word being spelled correctly here, incorrectly there, and with a different spelling down here, that really shows you that that word is not mastered. It is not certain. I hope that makes sense. Um, if you see letter size and letter spacing in handwriting, all of that inconsistency is a red flag. So look at that. If you see the addition of words, so reading and you're adding words that aren't there, or transposition of words, so words like for and from and the and or just switching the letters around to make a word that looks similar, maybe leaving words out that are in the text, particularly those sight words. So that will happen more often with sight words. Word recognition. So inconsistent word recognition. You're reading and, the child says the word put right up at the top. And then sure enough, a few paragraphs down, the word put is there. And it is like they've never seen the word before. They're trying to sound it out. So that can be a really big red flag. So complaints about visual perception distortion, we're going to go over that in a minute. But basically, if there's any kind of complaint about headaches or stomach aches while reading, that can be a key factor to better understand what I'm going to be talking about visual perception distortion. It can also be that you're not seeing the words accurately. There could be some movement on the page. The words shake or they blur or they hover. So those are all different ways that visual perception distortion can really make reading a nightmare. There's also basic things that you can look for. So avoidance of reading. You know, if something is easy for you, then you're not going to avoid it. So there's usually a reason why. Everyone wants to do their best. Everybody wants to do well in school. So if there's avoidance and frustration and overwhelm or just an unwillingness to read, there is something behind that is worth looking into. Another sign to look for would be that the intelligence doesn't match the ability to read and write. So this one was huge for me. It was also a source of huge frustration because I would look at my son who was so smart. He was so intelligent. I saw him learning all the time, but yet if I had said, "Oh, tell me a story about a cat," he would have this magical adventure that this cat would be going on. And it would just be detailed and it would be fabulous, this fabulous story. But if I asked him to write a story about a cat, it would be like, the cat is black. The cat was sad. The cat, and it would just be so limited compared to what he was really capable of. And so sometimes that can look like laziness or something, and it just isn't. It is a processing thing. It is a different output to write something than it is to speak it. If you have, seen your child or yourself, you read and then you reread and then you reread again with little comprehension, that's a key sign that something is up. And that is the whole purpose of reading, is to comprehend what you're reading. It's to learn, it's to be able to share an experience that the author intended you to have. And if you aren't getting that comprehension, then it is very frustrating and it doesn't make you want to read. You may also see phonetic spelling. So, spelling can be atrocious for people. It can be absolutely painful to try to figure out how to spell certain words. And so, oftentimes, you will see phonetic spelling, was, W-U-Z, or, something like that. Another sign to look for, you think they've got it, but then they don't. So I can't even tell you how many times I would study in college. I would study for a test. I would have it. Like I would have somebody testing me or asking me questions, and I would know those answers. And then when I got to the test, it was like white out. Couldn't remember anything. And that is a terrible feeling to have studied, to put in all that effort, and then have maybe stress of a situation come down and wipe that all away. It means that it wasn't really there, it wasn't mastered. It might come back to you once that stress is gone, but there is, again, it's that inconsistency. So I hope that makes sense. So why the inconsistency? So this is the first secret revealed. This is the actually the number one thing that that really no other programs are talking about, and they definitely are not addressing this. It is perceptual distortion. We call it disorientation. We're going to talk about that a little bit further in the next slides. But perceptual distortion is something that will happen in some shape or form for everyone with dyslexia. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're dyslexic and you're looking at this and this hasn't been your experience, that you don't, experience perceptual distortion. This is just one example of something that can happen. So this was very similar to what I would experience if I was overtired, or if the material that I was reading was could be uninteresting, but also if it was just something that I didn't really understand. One of the things with me in college was that it was always a mystery, like, well, why can I read something about sociology and totally understand it, but then when it comes to, my finance class, that it was just like the words would just blur and I got nothing out of it. Well, I would say that number one, threshold for confusion, which is the next bullet point, was reached because I just simply didn't understand the curriculum or what we were doing. And so my threshold for confusion would lower, at which point then the perceptual distortion would kick in. So if it was under any time pressure, I was overtired, if there were things in my environment that were distracting to me, if the material was not something that I connected with, I would end up getting this perceptual distortion. Now, it may not have been that bad, but definitely it does happen where people say, I can't, I have, they used to call dyslexia word blindness. So it is a perceptual thing that happens where suddenly the words aren't what they seem to be. They could be hovering, they could be moving, they could be, blurring like this. And it really is inconsistent based on where you're at on that threshold for confusion. Sometimes you wake up in the morning, you were organized the night before, you feel awesome, you have plenty of time, you get out of the house on time, you go to school and you perform a task and you rock at it and it's fine and you do really, really well. Well, what can happen is that on that day that you are on, and you are focused and you're with it, you're like right there, then it comes easy and you get benchmarked on that performance. Oh, look at that. You can do it, right? You just did a great job. Awesome job. The next day, you come in, you're exhausted, you had a late night, you were rushing around in the morning, you get to school, you go to do the same task and you bomb, or you just forget everything or whatever. And then what the perception is you're not trying hard enough. You're being lazy. What's happening? You did it yesterday. Why can't you do it today? And so there is this inconsistency, and it's frustrating for everyone involved, especially the person who is dyslexic and doesn't have the tools to know what to do when you get this perceptual distortion or when you're reaching that threshold for confusion before you just go over the edge and then you are having a really, really bad dyslexic day. Okay, so I wanted to do this little demonstration, especially for those who are not dyslexic, who really have a hard time understanding what it feels like to read as a dyslexic person. So this little demonstration, it may not be exactly what everybody sees, but it will definitely give you the feeling. So what I want you to pay attention to is what it feels like to read as a dyslexic. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to go to this next slide and I'll give you a minute or so to read this passage. Okay, stop. All right, so now we're going to have a pop quiz. Okay. All right, just kidding. But what I really want you to do is really feel, what did that feel like for you? Were you frustrated? Did you get stressed out? Were you confused? Hopefully you didn't get nauseous, but I have had people say, oh my goodness, that makes me so nauseous. Did you give up? Right? Did you just say, oh, forget it? Or did you double down and employ like extreme effort? Were you the type that would be like, oh, I'm going to get this, I'm going to figure it out? And I would ask you, could you answer any questions about this passage with certainty? So, what if this is how it felt to read all the time? And you had chapters of homework and just overwhelming amounts of text to read on a regular basis every day as you go to school. Would you want to do those 2 hours of homework after struggling like that for 6 hours a day? My guess is no. Um, it can be extremely tedious and overwhelming and exhausting. So just to remove that sense of confusion, I just wanted to give you what it really says. So just take a second, don't have to read the whole thing, but just scan through so that you can kind of get a sense of resolution to that. And basically, what I did was I took out all of those sight words and I added a little disorientation. So what you can see from this exercise is that those sight words actually have meaning. And if you're not able to process what you're reading and you're not able to process those sight words and have understanding of what they are, you are missing a lot of the text. You're missing the meaning. It gets very confusing very quickly, as you can see. So these sight words are one of the biggest problems when it comes to reading at any age. Okay, so I work with people from typically from 8 to 88 to 108. It doesn't matter. Every single person along the entire spectrum of age who is dyslexic will have issues with these sight words, whether you know it or not. And truly, when we say sight words, that's what they are called typically in school. They are called sight words or the Dolch list or the problem word list or the red word list. So these are not words that are easy for really any student. Okay, but When you have dyslexia and when you are a picture thinker and you do not have that verbal thought that is filling in all those blanks as you go, we actually call these words trigger words. So it's not just sight words, these are trigger words. They are words that trigger confusion, they trigger disorientation. So I hope that you guys are following this and that it is making sense and resonating. It is one of the absolute key pieces of dyslexia that if you can take anything away from this presentation, it is going to be the idea of disorientation and how it affects the learning cycle. So perceptual distortion and dyslexia, it can also distort many different aspects of a person's being. So being disoriented means that you have kind of like disconnected from whatever it is that you're doing. Now, every human being experiences disorientation. And the example I like to give is when you're doing some kind of low mental activity, something like driving or taking a shower or maybe fixing coffee or something like that, where you're kind of on autopilot and you don't really have to be paying too much attention to what you're doing in order to get it done. Okay. So when you're in that situation, what happens is that your mind tends to drift off. And so you're not paying attention really to what's happening in the physical world around you. You've kind of disconnected, you've disoriented from the physical world, and you are in your thought world. Okay. So when that happens, you may end up, so like if you've ever been driving and you arrive at your destination and you kind of think, oh my goodness, like I don't even remember the drive. How did I even get here? Did I stop at that stop sign? Or you could, forget where you're going and like, you're going someplace different for once and you end up, back at your house or, somewhere where you think, oh my goodness, I just totally went right by the exit or something like that. And really what happens is you are disorienting from what is going on in the environment. So everyone will experience that. And the other point that I wanted to make was that you don't stay there forever. Okay. So like you're driving and your mind goes off, but then you might, have someone, cut in front of you or a ball rolls out into the road. And what happens is that your attention snaps back and then you're very present. And so this is something that we need to better understand as a dyslexic person, how to do that at will. Because what happens for someone who is dyslexic is that disorientation is an automatic and involuntary response to confusion. And usually it is with symbols. So written words, it can be listening, auditory processing, and it can be output when you're writing. And that disorientation is what causes all of that perceptual distortion. So you are confused, you kind of disconnect from what you're doing, and then, the words might blur, or you start to make mistakes, or you're losing the meaning, or you're just simply disorienting into a much more pleasant thought process of, whatever you want to be, wherever you want to be, you can go. But that disorientation is going to happen quicker when your bucket is full, when your threshold for confusion is low. And once disoriented, information is not going to be perceived accurately. So it can vary minute by minute, day by day, and your senses are skewed. And it really is where this inconsistency is coming from. It is from disorientation. And it's virtually limitless in the ways that it can manifest. So I understand that this presentation is about dyslexia, but I want to get to the root because really the symptoms of dyslexia are the symptoms of disorientation. And we can also talk about disorientation as focus or attention or lack of. So let's just talk about the different ways that this can manifest in, as far as the labels that are used. And really, it all does boil down to disorientation. It's the key. So, dyslexia is disorientation with literacy, with words, with symbols, and reading, writing, spelling. We can have disorientation show up as ADD, distractibility. So someone with ADD might just be paying attention to everything in the environment and their mind is very easily distracted. So they get disoriented by a sound in the room or, they just go off into their imagination. ADHD is distractibility with hyperactivity or with hypoactivity. So with ADHD, we see disorientation and it also affects the perception of time. So time can feel like it's going really fast, time can feel like it's going really slow, and it's just very inconsistent. So you have a lot of disorientation around time and also with distractibility. So dyscalculia is when you have disorientation and just confusion and distorted perception when it comes to math, when it comes to problem solving in an equation, right? Written math. A lot of people with dyslexia or dyscalculia, they can do the math in their head, but showing it on paper is a real problem because they're getting to the answer in a different way. It is a pictorial way rather than an actual showing your work kind of thing with sequential pattern. Dyspraxia is disorientation that leads to balance and coordination problems. So people who have, they're bumping into things. They are always falling down the stairs or tripping up the stairs, or just have a really hard time with anything that has to do with balance and coordination. That's dyspraxia. Dysgraphia is disorientation when it comes to handwriting problems, writing problems. Um, and so that there can be a lot of disorientation and distortion in those letters as well and spelling. And then finally, there would be the ASD, which is autism spectrum disorders, which is also very much has to do with disorientation and the really kind of like the disconnection from social cues and things like that. So I just wanted to show you the broad spectrum of how disorientation can be at that center piece of all of these different things. But as I said, we are discussing dyslexia today. But there are programs that I provide for each one of these aspects of the bigger picture, dyslexia / disorientation. Okay, so just checking the time here. It looks like we are about on schedule. So I wanted to talk about secret number 3, which is why most of the interventions trying to help dyslexic learners are not helping as well as they could. Okay. Basically, the first thing to remember is that dyslexic learners are experiencing something very different than their neurotypical peers. I love this picture. You can see the 3 boys that are all understanding the sentence. I saw a big dog. And then you have this little guy at the end who's totally confused because he's reading, I was a big dog. Now, that could completely change the picture that boy has, and everybody else is on the same page, and he has something different. So there can be that disconnect, and the more and more of those disconnects, then the more confusing it gets. A truly dyslexic child, so versus a child who's just behind in cognitive development, but someone who is truly dyslexic will very likely be quite confused by phonetic instruction. And the reason is that it's very hard to engage with, let alone master something that you can't experience. So with someone who's dyslexic, um, when you don't have that verbal thought happening, you can't experience it. You can't be aware of something that you're not aware of. And so we all agree that dyslexia has to do with the lack of phonemic awareness. And what that is the lack of thinking in words. You're just not thinking with the sound of words. So many of the interventions that are trying to help dyslexics are coming from the angle of the deficit. So they're saying, well, you're not aware of these phonemes, so we need to give them to you. We need to fill in those holes. We need to give you all the sounds. And of course, some people with dyslexia, probably more on the mild side, will be able to come to resolution through those methods. But particularly when you have non-responders to phonetic instruction, that is when it's really important to try something different, because it can be very challenging and very almost detrimental to someone who cannot think in words, to try to keep giving them and keep drilling on their deficit. This is something that is very different about the Davis program. We come at it from a very different direction. And then the third thing would be that their foundation in language has just not been shored up enough to endure the endless, confusing rules that just have not been integrated. They haven't been settled into the knowledge base of that person. So when you start out and you have a child who can only sing the alphabet song, or maybe doesn't even have letter recognition, and you jump in to start giving them phonetic instruction, it's like that foundation is just not there. So it eventually will start to cave in. And so there needs to be something that is shoring up the foundation of language in a way that makes sense to someone who doesn't think with the sound of words. So what can be done about this, right? There are ways around this. And so now I want to talk a little bit about how we as dyslexic experts in the field of the Davis Dyslexia Correction Program address this. So the first thing is that we need to address the disorientation. And we need to fix the reason why the disorientation is occurring in the first place, which is confusion with symbols. So I love this quote by Ron Davis, and it's so true. When you fix the reason a problem exists, the problem ceases to exist. It's just like anything. If you have a leaky faucet, and let's just say, it's leaking everywhere, and you don't know what's causing the leak, it can feel overwhelming, and your mind is like, what is happening? Where is the problem? And that is very much what I experience when I talk to parents and kids with dyslexia, is like, it feels overwhelming. It just feels like there's so many different pieces to it. And how do you fix the problem? Well, what you really need are the right tools and the right coaching to be able to address the specific problem. And once you can do that, and once you address the reason why the problem exists, it ceases to exist. Just like calling an amazing plumber who comes over, finds the leak, fixes the pipe, it's done. Okay. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming, and it doesn't have to be something that you live with for the rest of your life. So let's talk a little bit about one of the pieces that we need to get to. Okay, one of the problems that needs to be fixed is state management. So let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, so if you are frustrated, anxious, overwhelmed, and just, basically like have had it, is any learning going to take place? No. So the first thing we need to do is to have that person have a tool to be able to relax, get relaxed. The second piece of this would be if you are exhausted, are you going to be learning? No. If you are hyper, are you going to be learning? No. So you've got to be alert somewhere in the middle. So having too low of energy or too high energy when you are trying to learn, when you're trying to read, when you're trying to communicate, it doesn't work. So we need to have tools to be able to bring yourself to an alert state right in the middle. And if you are off thinking about something else while you are in the learning process, if your focus is not there, your attention is not there, are you going to be able to learn? No. So you've got to be focused. So those three things, relaxed, alert, and focused, when you can have all three things in the same place at the same time, you get yourself to a place where you can learn, you can read, you can be attentive to what you're doing. It is totally common sense. However, in most school environments, these tools and how to do this is never taught. So if you don't know how to do it, you're in trouble. And if you don't know how to do it as a dyslexic student, then you're even more so in trouble. So the solution is to provide those state management tools. And so in the Davis program, we work with the three tools called Release, Dial, and we do orientation counseling. Um, so the first being the stress management, the release. It's pretty much a breathing technique and using your breath, no matter what modality there is. Breath work is very, very common. And it really is huge. It is our body's natural way of calming us down. So there is a tool that we have, a specific tool that includes breath work. Then we have a dial, which is all about your internal energy and being able to control that. So, does your energy level match whatever it is that you're doing? So, are you falling asleep at your desk, or are you so like agitated and high energy that you're bouncing around because your energy is just too high to sit still? So there are ways that we tap into that amazing dyslexic thinking style, that amazing imagination, and we create these tools to be able to really get conscious and aware and be able to change your own state as you need to. And then the orientation counseling is all about focusing, and it is turning off disorientation. It's a mental technique. It's easy to do. It does take a lot of practice, though. So we work one-on-one with clients to teach them how to orient themselves. And that picture is a great visual of what orientation is. So it is that your thoughts match what's actually happening. If your thoughts don't match what's actually happening while you're trying to learn, if your mind is off and disconnected and disengaged, then you're never going to be able to learn anything. And what you're reading is not going to go in correctly. So the next step is to fix the reason why that state management shifts. Okay, so why are you getting disoriented? Why are you getting stressed? Why are you getting frustrated? And as a person with dyslexia, it is most often confusion with symbols. So the very first thing we do with everyone, it doesn't matter how old you are, we actually work on fixing the confusions with letters. So I remember when I went through my own program that I did not think that I would have any issue with any of the letters. Now, some people are like, oh my gosh, I still have to sing the alphabet song when I look something up in the dictionary. Some people will look at letters and just, not want to go there. So really, there's a whole range. But I've never worked with anyone who didn't have any kind of confusion with the letters. So what we do is we work on the letters and we make sure that every single letter visually, just that they are very clear and that the alphabet is clear and that there aren't any confusions with any of the letters. If you have confusions with letters, then it's like if you can't tell, if you're looking at a B and you can't tell if it's a D, a P, a Q, a 9, a 6, right? Then sounding it out is the least of your worries. You have to make sure that those letters are solid, that they are oriented in the correct way, and that you know how to be looking at letters in an oriented state. So that's what we do for that. And punctuation can also be a big source of confusion. They're just symbols, and sometimes they can just appear to be these random symbols that make no sense, but there is actual meaning. It can completely change the meaning of a sentence. So we work with clay to actually bring that information, that knowledge through and create it so that you can experience it, so that you can understand it and it sticks. It's really, really brilliant. The clay is an absolutely brilliant, fun, multi-sensory technique that just really helps things to come into form. It's like things that were normally abstract and transient and confusing, you can bring them into form so that you can understand them, see it, touch it, tweak it, change it. It's incredibly simple and so brilliant and fun. And then we need to address the confusions with those sight words. So, as we talked about, sight words are a huge problem no matter how old you are when you are a picture thinker. So, there are 219 words that we know cause problems for people with dyslexia. They do tend to be on all of the words that are on the Dolch list or the sight word list or the red word list, although we do have a few that are slightly different. And basically, the idea is that if you have a trigger or a confusion with any of those words, or if it's a blank that you just don't, have a picture for, then all we really need to do is to fully understand the word and to get a picture for it. Because as someone with dyslexia, what we really need is full understanding. And so this is a very common set of words that cause people problems. And it's one of those things. Is it THERE? Is it THEIR? Which one is it? And there's just that uncertainty. And when you have that uncertainty and you're trying to write, it's just really pulling you away from your amazing idea, your amazing story, to try to have to figure out which one it is. Okay. So we've identified 219 words that we know need to be really mastered. We call them trigger words. Out of all the millions of words that exist, 219, that's all you need to do. It's very simple. So I'm going to show you how this works. So basically, you would need to look up the word in the dictionary. And if you were to look up THERE in the dictionary, you're going to see that it says in or at that place. And so you just kind of think about how you use that in a sentence. And basically, you begin to get a picture for how you could actually build something in clay. So this is my version of there, and whoever was doing this in clay is going to come up with their own picture, their own understanding of it. But for me, I showed it like this. So the dog is in that place. He's at that place. So he's on this other side of it. And the fence is that place. Okay, so it's in or at that place. And once you have that right there, you understand it, you can see it, it gives you a picture for it, then you actually create all of those letters and you're making a picture And it is absolutely brilliant because you can do it with your eyes closed. You can see the model, you can see the word just as if it was right there on the table. And once we go through the final process, there's just a kind of like a spot check kind of thing. And you're using your visual image of that. And what it does is it fills in that gap, it fills in the blank so that your brain has something to anchor the word to. You understand it, you've experienced it, you've created it, it's there. It's there. And it's permanent learning. And so the more of these trigger words that you do, the easier that reading gets, the easier writing gets, the easier spelling gets, because you are actually eliminating the reason why you're getting disoriented. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Once you do the word there, think about how many times in any given, chapter you would see the word there. So once you do that in clay, that is resolved. Okay, then let's go to the next there. It means belonging to them, their dog. So belonging to them. So I hope that you can see now the difference between those two words. I've had people come back to me after seminars and webinars like this and say, oh my goodness, now I know what they mean and I can picture your models. So if you can do that with just seeing this, imagine how much more effective it would be if you do it on, do it yourself and do that with your hands and create that. It is permanent learning. So then we also we work with fixing the tracking issues that oftentimes come along with dyslexia. And we also eliminate the guessing that happens. And it's very interesting because one of the ways that teachers have kids go through and read is that they will have them guess and say, take your best guess what the word is. And that may work for someone who is not dyslexic, but for someone who is dyslexic, guessing is a really uncertain way to do it. And it causes a ton of confusion because if you're not right, then your picture's wrong and everything after that gets messed up. So what we want to do is give certainty, absolute certainty that they have the right word. And we have very amazing and highly effective reading exercises to eliminate the overwhelm, the stimulus on the page. So we do use cards. A lot of times, if you just show someone with dyslexia full, you know, chapter, a page of text, or a page of math problems or anything like that, it's just overwhelming. It's like I can't possibly get through this. So covering it up, that's one tip that is really helpful. Covering up the stimulus can really help. But we have specific reading exercises that help improve the eye tracking. They prevent the guessing. It really improves spelling. And promotes comprehension. So just a little side piece about spelling. One of the reasons why spelling is so hard is that people with dyslexia tend to be whole word readers, or they're trying to be at least. So we're not looking at each letter of the word and sounding it out. And actually, as all natural readers will develop a pictorial dictionary of those words, right? So, but with someone with dyslexia, we're kind of looking at the shape of the word versus looking at all of the letters in between. So we can look at the shape of the word and it will go in and we either know it or we don't know it, or we may have misseen it and say a different word. But basically, spelling comes from reading. So until your reading is, flowing and you actually have those letters and you know the order that they go in, then spelling is going to be really challenging. So these reading exercises are amazing for all kinds of things that are behind the scenes, not just reading. And then the last solution, which I think is so important, is to embrace the gift. So students with dyslexia, they know that they are different. They know that they're not learning the same way as their peers. It's obvious. Okay. And every person wants to feel normal. They want to feel like they can do things, right? And one of the things that is so beautiful about the Davis program is that we see dyslexia as a gifted thinking style. It is not just, it's not a disability, it's a thinking style. And it can absolutely be used to your advantage in so many ways. And so, one of the things that we do is we learn to embrace the gift and understand how dyslexia is a gift and how to use it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. So, when you can start to do that, you can learn, you can understand with ease using these techniques, and the self-regulation tools eliminate the negative symptoms that you're having, and it enables you to actually get yourself to a place where you can learn. Um, and ultimately, my goal for every single client that I work with is that they leave feeling like a rock star. They understand themselves. That is so empowering. I can't even tell you how empowering it is to understand how you think and how you learn and be able to advocate for yourself, be able to explain to someone how you think. It is absolutely huge in a person's life. One of the first things we see end of a program is self-confidence, that self-esteem coming right back. And that is also one of the scariest things for a parent, is to see that self-esteem slipping away. And that is one thing that is immediately rebuilt once you understand what's going on. Okay, so I have not been able to see the chat questions, so I'm hoping that we're going to have time to do a Q&A. But for right now, I did want to just go over the basics, because if this information resonates with you, and this is information that you're thinking, wow, like, wow, this is it. I mean, I remember when I first read the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, the hairs on my arms were standing up. It was amazing. I thought, wow, this is huge. And it explained so much about what I was seeing in my son. And it helped me to better understand what was going on. It helped him to know what was going on. And so that tension, that frustration, the battles over homework just subsided because I got it. I understood it. And then as I went through the training and everything else, it got better and better and better. But this is actually the overview of the program that we took my son to, and that now I provide. I've been doing this for about 15 years now. It has been an amazingly fulfilling career. But this is what happens when you go through a program. So if you are interested, there is going to be a link where you can schedule an assessment. That is the first step in, the next step would be to schedule an assessment so that we can meet. Now, with COVID-19, we are doing online assessments as well as in-person assessments with, masks. So either way, whatever you're most comfortable with, we can go ahead and set that up. It is a 3-hour meeting. We go through all of the different aspects of the client's, life and what they're experiencing, because every person is different, that we need to actually be able to meet and set up a specific plan of action for each individual. So that is about a 3-hour meeting. And once we determine if the Davis program, or which Davis program is a fit, because like I said, we have multiple programs depending on how this is manifesting, we would go over the program logistics. But for the most part, the Davis Dyslexia Correction Program is a 1-week intensive program. Also can be done online through COVID until we have a vaccine, or we can figure out how this is going. We can do the programs online. We can also do them in person. It is a 30-hour program that is delivered one-on-one with me. And we go through all of the different steps that I talked about in the solution. So we have the tools, we go through the alphabet, the punctuation, we do the reading exercises, and it's very fun. I like to call it dyslexia boot camp, but it is just an amazing experience to go through. Um, there's all of the everything that you need in order to bring it forward into your life is provided, as well as support training where we train whoever is going to be supporting that person through the follow-up work. There is follow-up work that happens after the fact. If you saw um, the advertisement for this webinar, it said how dyslexia can be corrected in 30 days. Basically, what that means is that you come for the 1 week, 30-hour boot camp, you get all of that, the basic literacy symbols and everything that you need. That foundation is shored up during that week. But then after the week is over, you go through, you have a complete plan that we outline together, but you continue to work on the trigger words, those sight words, and you do the reading exercises, and there are a few things. So you could potentially, if you were to, like really stay on track, you can be finished with all of the follow-up work in that time frame. So anyway, it can go longer if you don't do the follow-up work as quickly, but yeah, 90 days you can be finished. And once all of those words are done, you are amazed at how much mental resources are freed up with reading, writing, spelling, and you can actually correct dyslexia. With the program, you have 3 post-program follow-up visits, also can be done on Zoom or online or in person. And those are 2-hour meetings where we just get together and we make sure that everything's going well. So those are for you to use however you want them to use them. But there's also, it is support for email, phone support as you do the rest of the follow-up work post-program. So what are your next steps? First of all, if this resonated with you and you have someone in your life that is struggling, just please don't wait any longer. I remember just searching for help, and we did all kinds of things to try to help my son, and the struggle just kept going and going, and we didn't know where to turn. And once I found the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, that was like I knew it. It was a hunch. I said, this is going to help him. And he felt like it was going to help him. That was the other thing. So just don't wait any longer than you have to in order to find help. Go ahead and schedule your 3-hour initial consultation like tonight. If this makes sense to you, if you got goosebumps, that's your intuition telling you, yes, yes. And so I'm going to be sending out a link with my calendar. And if you feel that you are ready, you can sign up for an initial consultation. I've opened up some slots for next week and a few in November. So go ahead and do that. What that is, it's a thorough screening with me, and it will determine if the Davis program will be a fit for you or your loved one. And you can watch your email for next steps as well. So I think actually right after this webinar, you will be receiving an email with the links to my calendar. If you're watching the replay, you can go to calendly.com/Karen-Legitimacy, which I will post also on Facebook so that you can have those next step options. Another option that is available, I understand that you may have questions, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the webinar, is that I will be opening this up for short Q&A. But I'm also offering free phone consultations, 30-minute phone consultations. So if you do have questions, or you're not quite ready to, just go ahead and schedule the initial consultation, then please do schedule a phone consultation with me so that I can better understand what's going on for you, answer any questions that you have, and we can just see what the next logical step would be. My schedule is limited, so I'm only one person, so I only have so many slots open. So just go ahead and sign up for that if you are interested so that you can get in. And I just wanted to end on this quote because I feel like it's a really important one. It comes from the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, and it says, dyslexia is not a complexity. It is a compound of simple factors that can be dealt with step by step. So if you are someone who is struggling with dyslexia, if you have someone that you love who is struggling with dyslexia, I want to leave you with hope because it is something that can be corrected. You do not have to struggle for the rest of your life with dyslexia. You do not have to have dyslexia hold you back from whatever it is that you want to do in your life. It does take some work to correct all of the aspects of dyslexia, but it is not something that is hugely complex. It actually is pretty simple to correct. So I do hope that you will sign up for a phone consultation or an initial consultation and that we can work together in the future. So that concludes the presentation, and I am going to just go to Q&A. So I think what I will do is stop my screen, stop share, check chat, see if anybody has added anything to chat. Okay, so we have no chat questions. Does anyone have a question that you would like to ask while we are here live? Just letting you know that you will be recorded. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so we have a question. What is the typical effort required over the 90 days? Okay, so basically what it works out to be is that there are those 219 words that need to be mastered in clay. So similar to those little clay pictures that I showed you of there and there. That is the most time consuming piece of it. I would normally say that, doing those words can take anywhere from, I don't know, 5 minutes to 20 minutes. It just really depends on how difficult the word is. Okay. And if you actually have a baseline understanding or if it's like a big trigger or whatever. So typically, and I actually have a list on my website. I wish I had access to it right now, but it's basically a chart that says, if you do 15 words a week, this is how long it's going to take you to finish them. So it's a combination of doing the words in clay and doing about 10 minutes of reading exercises a day if you can. We recommend doing it every day, but we understand life is life. And then there are koosh ball exercises, which actually just really help with focus and balance and hand-eye coordination. And then you just continue to use the focusing tools and the state management tools, which is something that you just do throughout the day. So really, if you were to set aside, an hour, you could get all of that done. And you could pretty much fly through the follow-up work if you were doing that consistently. But everybody has a different schedule. So we have, some people that are only doing the follow-up work 3 days a week. Some are doing it every day. So it really just depends on your life and what you need to accomplish in addition to that. So I hope if that answers your question. Okay, another question. Is there a writing portion after the first 90-day program, or is it all one program? So depending on what the goals are for each client, we actually create the program, the 30-hour program based on your goals. So if you had writing goals, then we would absolutely bring that piece of it in. And there are ideas and strategies and things like that that we would bring into the program so that then you could continue to use those tools outside of the program as part of your follow-up. So I hope that makes sense. Um, and then we have a question. How does this integrate with a student's IEP or techniques used in their special ed classes? So the tools themselves, the state management tools, those are something that only the individual can use, right? So they are used all the time. So anytime you can eliminate disorientation, you're going to be able to focus and to be in that state management piece of it where you're relaxed, alert, and focused. So that is up to each individual, each client to actually utilize those tools throughout their day. You will see a huge jump in performance no matter what you're doing when you are oriented, when you are focused, and when you're using those tools. So we see huge jumps in reading just because of the focus. It is something that is so important, so key to this, that it's going to make a big difference. So as far as that goes, that doesn't need any intervention with any teachers or anyone else. It's just the person themselves using that. Um, some schools are very open to helping in this process, so they can see the value of, understanding those sight words and correcting the reason why they're so difficult, and they could see that the student has improved. So a lot of times they will jump in and be really excited about it. Other schools, they say, well, we have our own ways of doing this, and so it will need to be done at home. In very severe cases of dyslexia, sometimes mixing the two can be confusing, but for the most part, what I would say is that um, when you're doing something like, I see that the next question has to do with Orton Gillingham or Wilson, which is a nice lead in. My feeling about it is that when you're doing a phonetically based program, first of all, if your child is not a verbal thinker at all or is very severely dyslexic, then that can be very confusing, the phonetic programs. But we also see that, of course, there are kids who do fine, but is it really getting you to the point where it's not a problem anymore, right? So what we typically see is that it gets to a certain point, and then it just kind of either levels out or they're still not at grade level or whatever. So I've always said that it would be amazing if the Davis work could be the precursor to doing any kind of phonics intervention. The reason being that what I said about, if you're looking at a letter and you're not sure if it's, what letter it is, then sounding it out really is the least of your problems. So there are definitely things that should come before that may not be there. That foundation isn't there. So I hope that makes sense. So does it work with other programs like Orton Gillingham or Wilson? It is an individual thing. There's really no way for me to say like straight out 100% yes or 100% no. Some kids come to Davis after doing years of Orton Gillingham, and finally it's like, it makes sense because now they have the foundation. Now it makes sense because they've mastered all of the letters, and they have, a better understanding of how they think and how they learn. So I hope that answers that question. It is a very different program. It is something that, if you're looking for a Wilson or Norton Gillingham program, this is not it. this is something that is very different. And sometimes you need something different. If you have been doing the same thing over and over again and are getting, you know, mixed results, or the results have kind of started to slope off, then it's time to consider something different. And this will fill in any holes that are there. So I hope that makes sense. Any other questions before we close out? I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight, and I hope that this has been helpful. Oh, we have one other question come in. Youngest age is 8, but what if your child is at a younger level? So there is a program that we have that is preventative, that we do from the ages of 5 to 7. It's called the Davis Readers um, the Davis Young Learners Program. Sorry. So basically, it's just not as intense. It's very gentle way to teach kids the alphabet and the sight words with clay and everything else, and the tools. So I can work with kids that are younger, but typically the dyslexia piece starts at 8. So thank you guys so much for coming. And again, I hope that you will set up a phone consultation or an initial consultation so that we can meet and talk about your specific questions or whatever. Oh, and I have one more question, which is, what would the hours be for the 30-hour week? That is flexible depending on, you know, the situation, but typically it would be, well, before COVID, it was from 8:30 to 3:30, either Monday through Friday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with a weekend in between, a Monday, Tuesday. Because of COVID, because of masks, because of working online, we're needing to be a little bit more flexible about that. So sometimes the days are a little bit shorter, but we work it out just depending on how everybody's schedule is doing, and just that threshold of being able to handle what's going on. So that is all worked out one-on-one as we create the program. So, all right. I don't see any other questions, and I thank you so much for being here tonight. And I will hopefully talk to you soon. You should be receiving an email with all of the links and the follow-up stuff. So don't worry about that. And I will see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.